The first thing I noticed was the way the child held his hand, like it belonged there. The ballroom smelled like lemon polish and warm bread, the kind of place companies rented when they wanted to look generous. White tablecloths, glassware that chimed when you set it down, and a low hum of laughter floating just above the music. My husband, Daniel, stood at the front of the room with a microphone in his hand, cheeks flushed, tie loosened the way he did when he was proud of himself, but trying not to show it too much. They were celebrating his promotion. I was standing near the dessert table when she approached me. She was younger than I expected, late 20s maybe, and she held a little boy by the hand. He had Daniel's eyes. Not similar, not close, the same, that exact soft brown with a darker ring around the iris, the kind of eyes you recognize even when you're trying not to. "Excuse me," she said gently, like she didn't want to startle me. "Are you his wife?" The room seemed to tilt just slightly, the way it does when you stand up too fast. I remember nodding because words felt too heavy to lift. She looked down at the child, squeezed his hand once, and then looked back at me. "I think you should know," she said. "He's his father." That was the moment something in me went quiet. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet, like a clock stopping in the middle of a room. Before that night, my life had been ordinary in the way you don't realize is precious until it's gone. Daniel and I had been married for 16 years. We met in our early 30s, both of us a little cautious, a little tired of games. He worked in corporate logistics, the kind of job that made sense when he explained it, but sounded vague to everyone else. I worked part-time at the library, shelving books, running children's reading hours, enjoying the predictable rhythm of days that smelled like paper and dust. Our home wasn't fancy, beige siding, a narrow backyard where the grass never grew evenly no matter how much Daniel tried. Sunday mornings were for pancakes, Friday nights were for takeout and old movies. We didn't have children, not for lack of wanting, but for reasons that quietly settled into acceptance over time. We learned to live around that absence, filling it with routines, with each other. Daniel was a good husband, or at least that's what I told myself when people asked. He remembered birthdays, he fixed things around the house, he kissed my forehead before leaving for work and texted me when he'd be late. There was comfort in him, and comfort can make you lazy with questions. His promotion didn't come as a surprise. He'd been working toward it for years. Late nights, business trips, whispered phone calls taken in the garage so he wouldn't wake me. I chalked it up to ambition, to stress, to the cost of climbing a ladder that promised security at the top. The party was his company's idea, a formal thank you. His boss shook my hand and told me how lucky Daniel was to have such a supportive wife. I smiled until my cheeks hurt. That was the version of me who existed before the woman with the child found me by the desserts. After she spoke, I remember asking her to repeat herself, not because I didn't hear, but because I needed time to rearrange reality. "He's Daniel's son," she said again, softer this time. "I'm sorry, I didn't know about you, not at first." The boy stared at the floor, swinging their joined hands. He wore a tiny blazer, the sleeves a little too long. He looked bored, innocent, entirely unaware that he was the center of my world collapsing. I started, then stopped. My mouth felt dry. Somewhere behind us, Daniel laughed loudly, the sound carrying over the room. I wanted to scream his name, but my body refused. "What's your name?" I asked her instead. "Marissa, and this is Leo." Leo. Of course it was Leo. Daniel had once mentioned the name casually, years ago, saying he liked it. I remember teasing him about it. I remember nothing else. I excused myself and walked to the restroom. I locked the stall and sat down, staring at the door. My hand shook, but my face stayed dry. No tears, just a deep aching pressure in my chest, like grief waiting for permission. I splashed water on my face and studied my reflection. I looked the same navy dress, same pearl earrings Daniel had given me for our 10th anniversary. I practiced a smile and went back out, because that's what I had learned to do in life, hold it together until it was safe to fall apart. Marissa was gone when I returned. Daniel was on stage now, thanking people, saying my name with affection in his voice. I clapped with everyone else. I even smiled at him. When we got home that night, Daniel was buoyant, riding the high of praise and champagne. He loosened his tie, kissed me, and said, "I couldn't have done it without you." I nodded. "We need to talk," I said. He froze, just for a second, but I saw it. That was my first real clue. Not the child, not the woman, but that tiny pause, the space where the truth hesitated. Before that night, my life had been ordinary in the way you don't realize is precious until it's gone. Daniel and I had been married for 16 years. We met in our early 30s, both of us a little cautious, a little tired of games. He worked in corporate logistics, the kind of job that made sense when he explained it, but sounded vague to everyone else. I worked part-time at the library, shelving books, running children's reading hours, enjoying the predictable rhythm of days that smelled like paper and dust. The first thing I noticed was the way the child held his hand, like it belonged there. The ballroom smelled like lemon polish and warm bread, the kind of place companies rented when they wanted to look generous. White tablecloths, glassware that chimed when you set it down, and a low hum of laughter floating just above the music. My husband, Daniel, stood at the front of the room with a microphone in his hand, cheeks flushed, tie loosened the way he did when he was proud of himself, but trying not to show it too much. They were celebrating his promotion. I was standing near the dessert table when she approached me. She was younger than I expected, late 20s maybe, and she held a little boy by the hand. He had Daniel's eyes. Not similar, not close, the same, that exact soft brown with a darker ring around the iris. The kind of eyes you recognize even when you're trying not to. "Excuse me," she said gently, like she didn't want to startle me. "Are you his wife?" The room seemed to tilt just slightly, the way it does when you stand up too fast. I remember nodding because words felt too heavy to lift. She looked down at the child, squeezed his hand once, and then looked back at me. "I think you should know," she said. "He's his father." That was the moment something in me went quiet. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet, like a clock stopping in the middle of a room. The hardest part of knowing something is wrong isn't the knowing, it's the pretending afterward. Every morning I woke up beside Daniel and studied his face while he slept, the crease between his eyebrows, the way his mouth softened when he exhaled. I wondered how long he'd been able to look at me like this, peaceful, unburdened, while carrying another life somewhere else. I kept thinking of Leo's hand and his mother's, the way it fit so naturally. Children don't fake that kind of belonging. Daniel kissed me goodbye every morning. He still asked about my day, still complained about traffic. If guilt lived inside him, it was quiet and well-trained. I started keeping notes, not in a dramatic way, just small observations written in a plain notebook I tucked into my purse. Dates, times, addresses from bank statements. I didn't know what I planned to do with them yet. I just knew I needed the ground beneath me to stop shifting. The first real crack came a week after the promotion party. Daniel said he had an overnight trip, last-minute meetings, he explained, the kind that come with higher responsibility. He packed light, too light, no laptop bag, no printed agenda. I watched him from the kitchen as he zipped his suitcase. "Which hotel?" I asked, keeping my voice even. He hesitated, just long enough. "The Marriott," he said. I smiled. "Drive safe." The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, I sat down at the table and stared at the wood grain until it blurred. Then I picked up my phone and did something I had never done in 16 years of marriage. I followed him. I told myself I just needed confirmation, something solid, but I already knew. What I was really doing was giving myself permission. I waited 15 minutes before leaving, then drove slowly, keeping 2 cars back. Daniel's route was familiar at first, highway exits I recognized, but then he turned off earlier than usual into a neighborhood of townhomes and small parks, the kind of place built for young families. He parked in front of a pale yellow townhouse. I didn't get out of my car. I didn't need to. Marissa opened the door. Leo came running out first, barefoot, laughing. Daniel knelt and scooped him up, pressing his face into the child's neck. It was an intimate gesture, unthinking, the kind that comes from repetition. I sat there, my hands clenched around the steering wheel, feeling something inside me finally click into place. Not heartbreak, clarity. I went home and slept better than I had in days. When Daniel came back the next night, I asked him how the Marriott was. He smiled. "Crowded," he said, "but productive." I nodded and passed him the salt. That was the night I decided I would not beg for the truth. If he could build another life without me noticing, then I could dismantle it without him realizing, at least not until I was ready. I contacted a lawyer the following week. Her office smelled like old carpet and peppermint tea. She listened without interrupting as I laid out everything I knew, the accounts, the child, the second household. She said, "You're not the first woman this has happened to," she said gently, "and unfortunately, you won't be the last." I asked her what my options were. She told me about marital assets, about hidden income, about documentation. I went home with a list and a strange sense of calm. Over the next 2 months, I became an expert in my own marriage. I found tax returns that didn't line up, discovered Daniel had been diverting a portion of his bonuses into an account under a shell company name, found lease agreements and insurance policies linked to Marissa's address. He had been careful, but care only works if no one is looking. I met Marissa again, this time on purpose. I called her number, which I'd gotten from an online directory. I told her who I was. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "I didn't know," she said immediately. "I swear." "I believe you," I said. And I did. We met at a small cafe halfway between our neighborhoods. She looked exhausted, older than she had at the party. Leo sat coloring beside her, humming softly. "He told me you were divorced," she said, her voice breaking, "that you didn't want kids, that he was just waiting for the right time." I stirred my coffee slowly. "How long?" She whispered, 6 years. 6 years. I did the math in my head, counted holidays, anniversaries, the years I blamed myself for not giving Daniel the family he wanted. "I'm not here to fight you," I said. "I just need the truth." She nodded, and she gave it to me. All of it. The vacations disguised as conferences, the nights he stayed late, the promises he made to her about leaving me once things settled. She said the promotion would make it easier for all of us. I smiled then, not because it was funny, but because the irony was almost poetic. Daniel's promotion was the key to everything. His company prided itself on ethics, on transparency, on family values. The promotion came with scrutiny, disclosures, audits, and Daniel had built his double life on the assumption that no one would look too closely. I didn't expose him immediately. I waited. I let him settle into his new role, let him enjoy the attention, let him believe he was safe. I organized our financial records meticulously. I filed paperwork. I prepared statements. I rehearsed conversations I might never have. And through it all, I stayed calm,
because revenge, when done quietly, doesn't need an audience at first. It just needs timing. One evening, Daniel came home late again. He loosened his tie, poured himself a drink, and sighed. "Things are about to get complicated at work," he said. I looked up from my book. "How so?" "They're auditing everything," he said. "Just routine, but still." I closed the book gently. "Daniel," I said, "is there anything you want to tell me?" He met my eyes. For a long moment, I thought he might break. Then he smiled. "No," he said. "Why?" I nodded. "Just thought I'd ask." Because some truths don't need to be forced out. They need to be released.
There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes from sharing a bed with someone who no longer shares your life. Daniel slept soundly beside me that night, his back turned, one arm flung across the empty space where I used to curl into him. I lay awake listening to the rhythm of his breathing, steady and untroubled, and wondered how a person learns to divide themselves so cleanly. Two homes, two versions of love, two sets of lies told with the same calm voice. In the morning, he kissed my cheek and asked if I wanted eggs or toast. I told him toast was fine. My stomach had learned to stay quiet these days. The audit, he mentioned, became the air in our house, unseen but present. He paced more, snapped at small inconveniences, checked his email constantly. I noticed he stopped humming in the shower. I kept doing what I'd always done, went to work, shelved books, smiled at the children during story hour. Their laughter rang too loudly sometimes, and I'd have to step into the back room until the tightness in my chest eased. One afternoon, my lawyer called. "They've scheduled an internal review panel," she said. "Senior management, legal, HR." I closed my office door at the library and sat down. When? 2 weeks. 2 weeks. It felt both close and impossibly far. That evening, I invited Daniel to sit with me at the dining table. He looked surprised, maybe even a little pleased. We hadn't sat like that in a long time. "I was thinking," I said, folding my hands, "we should plan a vacation, celebrate your promotion." He smiled, relief flickering across his face. "That sounds nice. Somewhere warm, quiet." He nodded. "I'll see what my schedule looks like." I watched him carefully, the way he avoided specifics, the way his smile never quite reached his eyes. "I'm proud of you," I said. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. His palm was warm, familiar. "Thank you," he said. "That means a lot." I wondered if he felt anything at all in that moment, or if pride, like love, was something he'd learned to imitate convincingly. The night before the review panel, Daniel barely ate. He drank instead. One glass turned into 2, then 3. He talked about office politics, about pressure, about how hard he'd worked to get where he was. "You know I do all this for us," he said, his words slightly slurred. I nodded. "I know." He looked at me then, really looked, like he was searching for something. Forgiveness, maybe, or reassurance. "Do you ever feel like you're being watched?" he asked. I thought of bank statements, of Marissa's tired eyes, of Leo's small hand in his. "Sometimes," I said, "but only when there's something to hide." He laughed nervously. "You always say things like that." I smiled. "Do I?" He went to bed early. I stayed up sorting papers one last time. Everything was ready, copies labeled, dates highlighted, truth laid out neatly, the way it never is when you're living inside it. I slept deeply for the first time in months. The review panel was held at the company's headquarters. Daniel wore his best suit, the one we'd bought together years ago for a wedding. He kissed me goodbye and told me not to worry. "He'll be late," he said, "but after tonight things will calm down." I watched his car disappear down the street, the sound of the engine fading. Then I picked up my own keys. The conference room was smaller than I expected. Neutral colors, a long table, bottled water set neatly at each place. Daniel sat on one side, flanked by his boss and a man from legal. On the other side sat 2 women from HR, and at the end of the table, my lawyer. Daniel's eyes widened when he saw me enter. "What's this?" he asked, standing halfway out of his chair. I took a seat calmly. I was invited. The room fell quiet. The legal representative cleared his throat. "Daniel, there are some discrepancies we need to address, financial ones." Daniel glanced at me again. His face had gone pale. As the meeting unfolded, I watched him unravel, not explosively, but gradually. A document slid across the table, then another, questions asked in measured tones, explanations offered and gently dismantled. The second household, the shell account, the misuse of company bonuses. When Marissa's name was mentioned, Daniel closed his eyes. "And the child?" one of the HR women asked softly. Daniel said nothing. I spoke then, my voice steady. "I didn't come here to punish him. I came here to tell the truth." The legal representative nodded, "And we appreciate that." Daniel's boss looked at him with something like disappointment, not anger, worse. "This is a serious breach of trust, both professionally and personally." Daniel finally looked at me. There was fear in his eyes now, and something else, recognition. He knew. The fallout was quiet but thorough. Daniel was placed on immediate leave pending further investigation. His promotion was suspended, his access revoked. We drove home separately. When he arrived hours later, the house felt different, smaller, tighter. He stood in the doorway, shoulders slumped. "Why?" he asked. "Why didn't you talk to me?" I folded a towel calmly, smoothing the edges. "I gave you chances. You chose silence." He sank on the couch, burying his face in his hands. "I never meant for it to go this far." "It went exactly as far as you took it." He looked up, eyes red. "What happens now?" I took a breath. "Now," I said, "we stop pretending." That night, Daniel packed a bag. He didn't argue, didn't beg, just moved slowly like someone walking through water. At the door, he paused. "I did love you," he said. I met his gaze. "I know, you just didn't love me enough." The door closed softly behind him. I stood in the quiet house and felt something lift. Not relief, not joy, but the end of waiting. The morning after Daniel left, the house felt hollow in a way I hadn't expected. Not empty, just quieter. Like a room after music has stopped, but the echo hasn't settled yet. I stood in the kitchen holding my coffee, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock over the sink. Ordinary sounds, the kind that remind you life is still moving even when yours feels paused. I didn't cry that morning. I cleaned. I stripped the bed, folded his forgotten sweater, wiped down counters that didn't need wiping. There was something grounding about putting things back in order, even if the biggest mess in my life couldn't be tidied with a sponge. By noon, my phone rang. Daniel. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call, and another. Messages followed, apologies stacked on top of justifications. I panicked. I didn't know how to fix it. "Please, just talk to me." I turned the phone face down, because talking was what we'd done for years. Talked around the truth, talked past it, talked ourselves into believing things would somehow stay contained. I didn't need more words. I needed distance. Marissa called that afternoon. "I heard," she said quietly, "from him." I closed my eyes. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it, for both of us. "What happens now?" she asked. I thought of Leo, of school mornings, of birthdays and bedtime stories Daniel had shared with him, things I'd never known existed. "That's up to you," I said honestly, "and him." There was a pause. "I don't want to be the reason you lost everything." "You weren't," I replied. "He made those choices long before you knew my name." We sat in that understanding for a moment, two women connected by the same man's deceit, both paying in different currencies. Before we hung up, she said, "He's scared." I almost laughed. "He should be." The divorce proceedings began quietly. No shouting, no public scenes, just paperwork, meetings, and the slow untying of a life built together. Daniel didn't fight me. Maybe guilt finally found its voice, or maybe he was too tired to keep lying. The financial disclosures revealed more than I'd expected. Assets I'd never seen, accounts opened in my name without my knowledge. He'd been planning for years, planning for a future that included me only as a placeholder. I felt foolish at first, then angry, then, strangely, grateful, because now I could see the truth clearly without the haze of love softening the edges. The settlement was fair, not generous, not cruel, just honest. When the papers were signed, Daniel looked smaller, like someone who'd spent too long pretending to be larger than he was. "I never meant to hurt you," he said. "I know," I replied, "but intent doesn't undo damage." He nodded, eyes glassy. "Do you hate me?" I thought about it, about the years we shared, the laughter, the betrayal. "No," I said finally, "I just don't trust you, and I don't build my life on things I can't trust." The company terminated his employment a month later. It wasn't publicized, no headlines, just a quiet removal, the way organizations erase mistakes they'd rather forget. Daniel called me that night, voice shaking. "I lost everything." I leaned against the kitchen counter, the same one I'd wiped down obsessively weeks earlier. "You lost control," I corrected gently. "Not everything." He didn't respond. "Leo still needs you. Be better there." The line went dead. The weeks that followed were strange, peaceful but tender, like walking on a healing bruise. I rearranged the house, moved furniture, donated clothes. I painted the spare room a soft green and turned it into a reading space, lining the walls with books I'd been saving for later. Later had arrived. At the library, I took on more hours. The children noticed I smiled more, or maybe I just smiled differently, less performative, more real. Sometimes late at night, I still thought of Daniel, of the man I believed he was, of the life I thought we were building. Grief doesn't follow a straight line. It loops, it revisits, it surprises you in grocery store aisles and quiet songs on the radio, but it softens with time. One afternoon, months later, I ran into Marissa at the park. Leo was chasing pigeons, laughing, his joy uncomplicated. Daniel wasn't there. "He sees him every other weekend now. He's trying." I nodded. "That matters." She hesitated. "I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "For not turning this into something uglier. You could have destroyed him." I watched Leo trip, then get back up unfazed. "I didn't want destruction. I wanted truth." She smiled sadly. "You're stronger than you know." I shook my head. I just stopped lying to myself. That night, I sat on my back porch as the sun dipped below the trees. The air smelled like cut grass and rain. I wrapped a sweater around my shoulders and listened to the world settle. I thought about how easily love can blind us, how loyalty, when unexamined, can become self-betrayal, how dignity sometimes looks like silence and sometimes like walking away. I hadn't gotten revenge in the way stories like to tell it. There was no grand speech, no public humiliation, just consequences and peace. Peace, I learned, doesn't arrive all at once. It comes in small, almost forgettable moments, and then suddenly you realize you've gone an entire day without bracing yourself for pain. The first moment I noticed was ordinary. I was standing in the cereal aisle at the grocery store, staring at two boxes I didn't really care about, when it hit me. I wasn't rushing home. I wasn't checking my phone. I wasn't wondering who Daniel might be with or what excuse he'd offer later. I was just there. That was when I understood how heavy the weight had been, even before I knew its shape. Life after Daniel settled into a quieter rhythm. Mornings became mine again. I slept diagonally across the bed if I wanted to. I drank my coffee slowly, watching sunlight crawl across the kitchen floor. On weekends, I took long walks through neighborhoods I'd never bothered to explore before, noticing gardens, wind chimes, children riding bikes in lazy circles. I wasn't lonely the way I'd feared. I was adjusting. Healing doesn't feel heroic. It feels awkward, like learning how to live in a body that's changed without asking your permission. Some evenings were harder than others. I'd catch myself reaching for my phone to tell Daniel something small, a funny sign I'd seen, a memory from years ago, before remembering that we no longer shared those spaces. Those moments hurt, but they passed. I let them. About 6 months after the divorce, Daniel asked to meet. "I understand if you say no," he said in the message. "I just need to apologize properly." I stared at my phone for a long time before replying. 1 coffee, public place. We met at the same cafe where Marissa and I had once sat across from each other, bound by truth neither of us had asked for. Daniel looked different, thinner. His confidence, once worn like a tailored suit, now hung loosely around him. "Thank you for coming," he said, standing awkwardly. I nodded and sat. "What did you want to say?" He wrapped his hands around his cup, knuckles white. I thought I could keep everything separate. I convinced myself I was protecting everyone. "You were protecting yourself," I said gently. He swallowed. "I know that now." There was silence between us, not uncomfortable, just final. "I'm in therapy," he added, "for whatever that's worth." "I hope it helps," I said honestly. He looked at me then, really looked, like he was seeing me without the fog of entitlement for the first time. "You didn't ruin my life," he said quietly. "I did." I felt no satisfaction in hearing it, just closure. "I wish you well, Daniel," and I meant it. We didn't hug, we didn't linger. We stood, exchanged a nod, and walked in opposite directions. That was the last time I saw him. A year passed. The seasons changed the way they always do, without asking permission. Spring brought blossoms to the park near my house. Summer filled my evenings with warm air and distant laughter. Fall painted the trees out my window in colors I'd once ignored. I started volunteering at a women's literacy program through the library. Sitting with women who were finding their voices, sometimes for the first time, reminded me how easily silence can be mistaken for strength. Strength, I learned, is telling the truth, even when your voice shakes. Sometimes, especially then. One evening, as I shelved books after closing, a woman approached me. She looked nervous, clutching her bag tightly. "I don't know why I'm telling you this, but I think my husband is lying to me." I listened. I didn't interrupt. I didn't tell her what to do. I just listened. When she finished, she sighed. "You seem like someone who understands." I thought of the woman I'd been, standing by the dessert table, holding a truth too heavy to carry alone. "I understand," I said softly, "and whatever you decide, make sure it honors you." She nodded, tears in her eyes. As she walked away, I realized something quietly profound. My story didn't end with betrayal. It transformed into something useful. On the anniversary of the promotion party, the night my life split cleanly in two, I lit a candle and sat alone in my living room. I didn't do it to mourn. I did it to remember. I remembered the woman I was before I knew, the woman I became when I learned, and the woman I was still becoming. Betrayal taught me many things, but the most important was this: love without honesty isn't love, it's performance, and I was done applauding. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about that ballroom. Not in the way you revisit trauma, but the way you revisit a crossroads. The polished floors, the low music humming beneath polite applause, the moment when a stranger's voice cut through the noise and quietly changed the direction of my life. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment my pretending ended. We all pretend in small ways. We pretend we don't notice the change in tone, the longer pauses, the stories that don't quite line up but feel easier to accept than to question. We call it love. We call it loyalty. We tell ourselves that good marriages survive silence. But silence, I learned, doesn't protect love. It protects lies. For a long time after everything ended, I carried shame that wasn't mine. Shame for not seeing it sooner. Shame for trusting. Shame for being the woman who stood beside her husband while he lived another life somewhere else. It took time to understand this truth. Trust is not a flaw. It's a virtue. And the person who breaks it is the one who should carry the weight. Betrayal doesn't mean you were foolish. It means you were sincere in a world that sometimes rewards deception. I also learned something harder, something no one tells you when your life falls apart quietly, without sirens or spectacle. You don't get closure from the person who hurt you. You get it from the choices you make afterward. For me, closure wasn't hearing Daniel admit his guilt. It wasn't watching his career unravel or seeing his confidence fade. Those things happened, yes, but they weren't the ending. The ending came the first morning I woke up without bracing myself for disappointment. It came the first time I laughed, really laughed, without wondering if I was betraying my grief. It came when I realized I no longer needed answers because I finally trusted my own. There's a strange freedom that comes when the worst thing you feared already happened and you survived it. You stop negotiating with your intuition. You stop shrinking your needs. You stop mistaking endurance for love. And slowly, quietly, you begin to expand again. I didn't rebuild my life with grand gestures. There was no dramatic reinvention. I didn't move cities or change my name or fall into a perfect new romance. I rebuilt it with honesty. I learned to ask myself difficult questions and to listen to the answers, even when they made me uncomfortable. I learned that peace isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up as steadiness, as rest, as the absence of dread. Some nights I still feel sadness for the years I spent loving a man who couldn't meet me in truth, but I no longer see those years as wasted. They taught me how deeply I can love, how patiently I can endure, and how bravely I can walk away. And those are not small lessons. If you are listening to this and you feel something stirring in your chest, something uneasy, something familiar, I want you to hear this gently, without judgment. You are allowed to question the life you're living. You are allowed to want honesty instead of comfort. You are allowed to leave situations that require you to betray yourself to survive them. Love should not require blindness. Marriage should not require self-erasure. And loyalty should never demand your silence in the face of truth. Sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is stop explaining why she deserves better and simply choose it. I know there are listeners out there who stayed, who discovered the truth and decided to make peace with it for reasons only they fully understand. Children, finances, fear, hope. There is no single right answer. But there is one truth that applies to all of us. Whatever you choose, it should not cost you your dignity. Staying should be a choice, not a sentence. Leaving should be an act of self-respect, not shame. And healing, real healing, comes when you stop asking, why wasn't I enough, and start asking, why did I accept less than honesty? The difference between those questions can change your life. I don't tell my story because I want pity. I tell it because stories like mine live quietly in too many homes, because women sit at dinner tables every night swallowing doubts they don't feel allowed to voice, because betrayal thrives in secrecy and dissolves in truth. If my story did anything, I hope it gave you permission. Permission to listen to your instincts, permission to demand transparency, permission to choose peace, even when it means walking away from everything familiar. You are not dramatic for wanting honesty. You are not cold for setting boundaries. You are not weak for leaving a lie. You are brave. So I'll ask you the same question I had to answer when my world split open in a room full of applause. If the truth stood in front of you, quiet, undeniable, holding proof in its hands, what would you do? Would you protect the illusion, or would you protect yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your stories matter more than you know, and someone listening right now may need to hear that they're not alone. And if this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of your own strength, your own quiet resilience, please like, subscribe, and stay with this channel. Here, we tell the truth gently. We honor dignity over drama. And we believe that even after betrayal, a woman can rebuild a life that feels whole again. Take care of your heart. It knows the way forward. There's a quiet chapter that comes after healing, the one no one talks about because it doesn't feel dramatic enough to earn a headline. It's the chapter where nothing explodes, where no one apologizes in a way that fixes everything, where life simply continues. That chapter is where I live now. Some mornings I wake up before the alarm and lie still, listening to the house breathe. I notice how the air feels lighter when it isn't weighed down by anticipation. There's no mental checklist of lies to ignore, no emotional weather forecast to predict which version of someone I'll come home to. I didn't realize how much energy that took, being alert all the time, even in love. Freedom isn't fireworks, it's rest. I've been asked more than once if I would do anything differently. The honest answer is no. Not because I didn't make mistakes, but because every step I took led me to clarity, and clarity is a gift you can't receive without walking through confusion first. If I had confronted Daniel the moment I suspected something, he would have denied it. He would have cried, promised change, maybe even convinced me, at least for a while. And I would have stayed trapped in a half-truth, always wondering what else I didn't know. Instead, I waited until the truth could stand on its own. That wasn't weakness, it was discernment. There's a difference between reacting and responding. I chose to respond. People also ask if I ever think about Leo. I do. I think about how innocent love is, how it doesn't understand consequences or betrayal or divided loyalties. I hope he grows up knowing stability, honesty, and accountability. I hope he learns that love is not something you split in half and hide. I hope he grows up watching adults take responsibility for their choices. That may be the most important inheritance he receives. As for Daniel, I don't carry anger anymore. Anger burns hot, but it also burns out. What remains is understanding, not acceptance, but comprehension. I understand now that some people are more afraid of discomfort than dishonesty. They choose deception because it feels easier than facing the disappointment of others or themselves. But easy choices often demand the highest price later. Daniel didn't lose his life. He lost the version of himself he pretended to be, and that is something only he can rebuild. I've also learned something unexpected about forgiveness. Forgiveness is not reconciliation, it's not forgetting, and it's certainly not excusing. Forgiveness for me was releasing the hope that the past could have been different.
That hope kept me tethered to pain. Once I let it go, I stopped replaying conversations that never happened. I stopped imagining apologies that would never come in the form I needed. I stopped asking why, because why doesn't always have an answer that heals. What heals is acceptance, not acceptance of what was done, but acceptance of what is. I'm often asked if I'd ever marry again. I don't rush to answer, not because I'm afraid, but because I'm content. Contentment is dangerous in a world that profits from convincing women they're incomplete without someone else's presence. I am open to love, but I am no longer hungry for it, and there is a difference. Hunger makes you compromise. Wholeness makes you selective. If love enters my life again, it will be honest or it won't enter at all. What I know now with certainty is this: betrayal doesn't break you, it reveals you. It strips away illusions. It forces you to confront your boundaries. It asks you who you are when the story you believed in falls apart. And if you listen, truly listen, it teaches you how strong you've always been. I didn't survive because I was exceptional. I survived because I chose truth over comfort, and that choice is available to anyone. If you're still listening, still sitting with this story, I want you to take a quiet moment with yourself, not to judge your life, not to panic, just to notice. Notice where you feel tightness. Notice where you've been explaining away pain. Notice where silence has replaced honesty. Those places are not accusations, they're invitations. Invitations to ask better questions, invitations to protect your dignity, invitations to stop shrinking your truth so others can stay comfortable. You don't have to make a decision today. You don't have to confront anyone tomorrow, but you do owe yourself honesty. That is where every real change begins. I'll leave you with this, not as advice, but as a reminder I carry with me now. You can love deeply and still walk away. You can be kind and still demand accountability. You can forgive and still choose distance. These truths can coexist, and when they do, something remarkable happens. You stop surviving your life and start living it. Thank you for sitting with my story. Thank you for honoring your own by listening. Take care of your heart. It's wiser than you think.
There is a moment, quiet and unremarkable, when you realize the story has truly ended. Not when the papers are signed, not when the house is rearranged, not even when the memories stop hurting. It ends when you stop introducing yourself to the past. For me, that moment came on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I was standing in line at the post office, holding a package I'd wrapped for a friend when the clerk asked for my last name. I gave it without hesitation. My name, not Daniel's. Not the name I'd carried for 16 years out of habit and hope, just mine. And it felt complete. I walked out into the sunlight with that small victory warming my chest, realizing how many pieces of myself I'd been quietly collecting back, one choice at a time. People assume healing looks like confidence, like smiling more, like being over it. But real healing is subtler than that. It's trusting your reactions again. It's believing yourself when something feels wrong. It's no longer negotiating with your inner voice. For years, I had second-guessed my instincts. If Daniel dismissed something, I let it go. If a detail didn't add up, I told myself I was imagining things. I learned how to soften my questions so they wouldn't sound accusatory, how to swallow discomfort for the sake of harmony. That habit didn't disappear overnight. Even after the truth was out, I caught myself doing it, minimizing my needs, apologizing unnecessarily, explaining my boundaries as if they required permission. Unlearning that took time, but slowly I replaced the question, "Am I overreacting?" with, "Why does this matter to me?" And the answers changed everything. I started saying no without rehearsing my reasons. I stopped attending events that drained me out of obligation. I stopped maintaining relationships built on politeness instead of care. I stopped shrinking my opinions to avoid discomfort. None of this made me colder. it made me clearer. There is a myth that women who walk away from betrayal become bitter, hardened, closed off. I found the opposite to be true. When you stop accepting dishonesty, you become more tender with what deserves your trust. I laugh more easily now. I listen more deeply. I give affection freely, but not blindly, because discernment isn't distrust. It's respect for yourself. Every so often, someone will say, "You're so strong," in that tone people use when they think strength means you weren't afraid. I always want to tell them the truth. I was afraid. I was afraid of being alone, afraid of starting over, afraid of discovering that my marriage, the thing I'd invested my life in, was built on a lie. But courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing not to let fear decide for you. And I think that's the part of these stories we don't say out loud often enough. Staying can be just as brave as leaving, but only if it's chosen freely with full truth. I didn't leave because I was angry. I left because I finally respected myself. There is a difference. Sometimes I still think about the woman I was before that night, the woman holding a plate of dessert, smiling politely, unaware that her life was about to fracture. I don't feel sorry for her anymore. I feel tenderness. She loved honestly. She believed in commitment. She trusted the man she built a life with. Those are not weaknesses. They are qualities the right person would have protected. And if no one ever told you this before, let me say it now. Someone else's betrayal does not rewrite your character, it reveals theirs. I don't know what Daniel's life looks like now. I don't check, I don't wonder. Not because I'm indifferent, but because my peace no longer depends on knowing. That may be the final stage of healing, when curiosity fades and acceptance remains. I wish him accountability. I wish Leo stability. I wish Marissa clarity. And I wish myself, always, truth. If you've stayed with this story all the way through, I want to thank you, not just for listening, but for witnessing. Stories like this live quietly in many hearts. They surface in whispered conversations, late-night doubts, and moments of stillness when you finally admit something isn't right. If this story felt familiar, I hope it reminded you of one simple truth. You are allowed to choose a life that doesn't require you to look away. You are allowed to ask questions even when the answers might change everything. And you are allowed to rebuild, not because you failed, but because you grew. There is dignity in walking away from a lie. There is power in choosing honesty. And there is peace waiting on the other side of self-respect. Thank you for listening to mine. And if you're standing at the edge of your own truth right now, quietly, carefully, know this: whatever you choose next, choose yourself gently. Healing, I learned, doesn't arrive as a single moment of clarity. It comes in layers, some gentle, some sharp, and each one asks something different of you. The first layer is survival. You wake up, you breathe, you put one foot in front of the other even when your chest feels hollow. You learn how to exist inside a life that no longer resembles the one you planned. The second layer is truth, not the kind you uncover about someone else, but the truth about yourself, what you tolerated, what you ignored, what you were afraid to lose. That layer is the hardest, because it asks you to look at your own silence. For a long time after the divorce, I replayed small moments from my marriage like old home videos, things that felt insignificant at the time, but now glowed with meaning. The way Daniel would step outside to take calls, the bank statements he insisted on managing alone, the tiredness in his eyes that didn't match the hours he claimed to work. None of those moments screamed betrayal, they whispered it, and I had taught myself not to listen. That realization hurt more than discovering the secret family, because it forced me to face a painful truth. I had been trained by love, by habit, by fear, to make myself smaller in the presence of someone else's comfort. I don't say that with shame anymore. I say it with understanding. When you love someone deeply, you want the story to stay intact. You don't want to be the person who pulls on a thread that might unravel everything. So you convince yourself that silence is patience, that compromise is maturity, that doubt is disloyal. Until one day, silence becomes self-betrayal. And that's when something inside you finally refuses to stay quiet. The third layer of healing is grief, not just for the marriage, but for the future you imagined inside it. I grieved the trips we never took, the retirement we once discussed over Sunday coffee, the version of growing old together that now existed only in memory. Grief doesn't always look like tears. Sometimes it looks like standing in the grocery store staring at a product you no longer need to buy for two. Sometimes it's realizing no one will text you to ask what time you're coming home. It's the absence that stings. But grief is also proof that you loved honestly, and that matters. Then comes the quiet layer, the one people don't talk about much, relearning joy. Joy feels risky after betrayal. You approach it cautiously, as if it might disappear the moment you relax into it. At first, it shows up in small ways. A morning where you wake up without dread, a laugh that surprises you, a moment of peace that doesn't feel borrowed. I started finding joy in things I used to rush through, cooking for myself, slowly, walking without checking my phone, sitting in silence without needing to fill it. There is something powerful about realizing your life can be full even when it's quiet, especially when it's quiet. People often ask me if I would want to know the truth earlier, if I could go back. That's a complicated question. Of course, part of me wishes I hadn't lost so many years to a lie, wishes I hadn't offended someone who didn't deserve my loyalty. But another part of me knows this: I wasn't ready until I was ready. Strength doesn't always arrive on schedule. Sometimes it grows slowly beneath the surface until one day it's strong enough to carry you through the worst revelation of your life. If the truth had come earlier, I might have folded under it. When it came, I stood, and that matters too. I also learned that revenge doesn't always look like exposure or punishment. Sometimes revenge is indifference. Sometimes it's thriving quietly. Sometimes it's no longer needing answers from the person who hurt you. The greatest power I reclaimed was the ability to choose what and who deserved my emotional energy. I stopped explaining my past to people who hadn't earned my vulnerability. I stopped justifying my decisions to those who weren't living my life. I stopped carrying responsibility for someone else's deception. That freedom didn't make headlines, but it changed everything. There is a particular loneliness that comes from being betrayed in plain sight, from realizing that while you were attending office parties and smiling for photos, another life was unfolding parallel to yours, unknown, unacknowledged, and carefully hidden. That kind of betrayal shakes your sense of reality. So if you're listening to this and wondering why you still question yourself, why trust feels complicated, why certainty feels fragile, let me say this gently: that is not weakness. That is your mind learning how to protect you. With time, that protection softens. It becomes wisdom instead of fear. I don't claim to have all the answers now, but I know this: love should not require you to abandon yourself. Commitment should not be built on secrecy, and loyalty should never be one-sided. If you are constantly explaining your pain instead of being met with care, something is wrong. And if you've been taught to endure instead of question, know that questioning can be an act of self-respect. So as I move forward, I carry the lessons with me, not like scars, but like maps. They remind me where I've been. They remind me what I will never accept again. They remind me that I survived something I once believed would destroy me, and that knowledge is quiet but unshakable. So if this story mirrors something in your own life, if you are standing in a room full of applause, smiling while your instincts whisper unease, I hope you pause long enough to listen, because the truth doesn't come to punish you, it comes to free you.
Would you be brave enough to hear it if it did?
There came a morning, months after the paperwork was finalized, after the house was sold, after my name stood alone on my own accounts, when I woke up and realized something had shifted. Not dramatically, not like a door slamming shut. It was quieter than that. I made coffee and noticed I wasn't bracing myself for the day. I wasn't rehearsing old arguments in my head. I wasn't wondering what Daniel was doing or who he was lying to now. The silence inside me felt settled. That's when I knew I had crossed into the last stretch of healing. I didn't move away. People expected me to. They said it would be easier to start fresh somewhere new, where no one knew my story. But I had learned something important. Running wasn't the same as healing. So I stayed. I rearranged the furniture in my apartment until it no longer resembled the life I'd lived before. I donated the things that carried too much memory. I kept a few items, not out of longing, but out of acceptance. This chapter existed. It shaped me. It didn't own me. I also returned to work with a steadiness that surprised even me. Colleagues were careful around me at first, unsure of what to say. Some avoided eye contact, others offered clumsy sympathy. I accepted it all with grace. Because what they didn't know was that I had already endured the worst part, the moment of realization, the unraveling, the choosing myself. Everything after that was manageable. One afternoon, nearly a year after the promotion party, I ran into someone I hadn't expected to see again. It was the woman. She stood in the produce aisle, holding a basket instead of a child this time. She looked thinner, tired, older in a way exhaustion carves into people. Our eyes met. For a second, neither of us moved. Then she nodded. Not an apology, not a challenge, just acknowledgement. I nodded back. That was all. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel triumph. I felt something far more powerful, detachment. I walked away knowing I didn't need closure from her or Daniel. I had already given it to myself. Daniel tried to reach out once more after that. A message, short, careful. I hope you're well. I stared at it for a long time. Then I deleted it. Not because it hurt, but because it didn't. And that was my answer. People often think strength is loud, that it looks like confrontation or dramatic exits or public declarations of independence. But I learned that real strength is quiet. It's choosing not to respond. It's refusing to reopen wounds just to prove they exist. It's building a life so full that the past no longer demands attention. Strength is waking up one day and realizing you are no longer defined by what broke you. If I could speak to the woman I was before that night, the one smoothing her dress at a celebration meant to honor her marriage, I would take her hands and say this: you are not foolish for loving, you are not weak for trusting, and you are not responsible for someone else's deception. I would tell her that pain will come, yes, but so will clarity, and clarity, though it hurts, will lead her home to herself. Today, my life is quieter. There is no shared calendar, no need to check in, no double meanings hidden in conversations. There is honesty, sometimes messy, sometimes imperfect, but real, and that is worth everything I lost. If you're listening to this and carrying a secret fear, if something doesn't add up, if your intuition keeps tapping you on the shoulder, don't ignore it. You don't need to panic, you don't need to accuse, but you do need to listen, because the truth has a way of finding us when we're finally strong enough to survive it. And when it does, remember this: you are allowed to walk away with your dignity intact. You are allowed to rebuild without apology, and you are allowed to choose peace over explanations. I did, and it saved me.